I've never actually felt as burnt out as when I was at PwC.
How did you change being an entrepreneur?
There's a lot more pressure and a lot more people depending on you in startup life.
What you're about to hear is conversation between me and Foong, the founder and CEO of Matchable. Foong has been recognized as one of the top 100 Asian stars in UK tech. Before that, she was a director at PwC, advising on big M&A deals. We dive into her fascinating journey from a Cambridge graduate into becoming an accountant because her parents wanted, and then leaving corporate life to start Matchable, an award-winning B2B platform that connects companies and employees with impactful volunteering projects. We also talk about having a tiger mom, making big life decisions, and how to find purpose by aligning your career with your values.
When you're in a big company, you need to go through a lot of sign-off to affect change. You need to go through a lot of politics, and then the change is slow. In the startup world, if you want to change something or try something or test something new, it's really easy to do that. And I think it's so empowering to be able to do that. Before you start anything, just get to know yourself. And it's okay to take that time to really understand what really matters to you. My second bit of advice is also to be flexible in terms of how you achieve the thing you want to achieve.
What was the hardest moment in your journey so far?
Oh, there have been so many hard moments, Annie. I think the one that stays with me the most is...
Please hit subscribe to the show and leave a review or comment about how you find this episode. The first thing I wanted to start with is asking you about your life. What was your childhood? And what was these events from your childhood and early adulthood which influenced you and created you the way you are at the moment?
Yeah, I think the most influential sort of force for me was my mother. So I'm Asian, as you can probably tell. And my mum was a bit of a tiger mum, actually.
Okay.
She's since sort of mellowed and actually sort of become more enlightened.
Yeah.
And more aligns with maybe my values. But as I was growing up, I was brought up in a very kind of Asian culture. It was very much work hard, pick a profession, become great at that profession. And success was always defined as, a partner in a law firm or an accounting firm or a consulting firm or a doctor or a dentist, something very stable.
Yeah.
And I guess that was the sort of culture and mentality and version of success and all the values that I was brought up with that really defined me. So, for example, when I was little, my mum actually watched a documentary on, they were building the Channel Tunnel, so the Eurostar.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the time, so this is back in the 80s, and she watched a documentary that basically said French is going to be the next big language.
Yeah.
So she decided, we're Chinese by origin, and we come from Malaysia, and we speak English and some dialects. And she decided that she would send me to French school.
Okay.
So she packed me off when I was 6 years old. And she dropped me, total immersion, into a French school. I knew no French. I couldn't communicate with anyone. But this is very much my mum's mentality, sort of sink or swim, here you go. And luckily, my best friend at the time was bilingual, so translated everything for me. And then slowly, as I kind of sort of learned French, I started kind of getting more embedded in the system. And then I ended up becoming top of my class. And this was very much incentivized by my mum. So every time I would get top marks, she would give me £1. And if I didn't come first in class, she would take away £1. So I was net up overall. But it kind of fostered a very sort of competitive environment, which I think we can talk about later. But it did actually ultimately sort of lead to quite a lot of burnout and anxiety for me.
Yeah.
But it also drove me very hard. And I guess overall really made me believe that, whatever got thrown at me, I didn't really have a choice but to deal with it. So I think that's really kind of shaped me throughout the years.
Wow, what an example. I mean, I spent 5 years in Singapore and 5 years in Hong Kong. So I know very well the Asian culture. And absolutely, unless you're an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, nothing else matters, right? That's it. You have a destiny. You just have to tick the marks as you go, right?
Exactly this.
I just can't imagine, we'll speak later, what did your mom said when you left your career and you started your company? That must have been a big, big issue, right?
100%. We can definitely talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So from that background, you went to Cambridge, which I can understand now 100%. And then you started a financial career. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? What was your drive to start that, apart from your mom probably pushing you in that direction?
I think a large part of it was my mom actually pushing me in that direction. So yeah, I eventually went to Cambridge and I read law with French law there actually. So it was a 4-year degree where you spent 2 years in Cambridge and then 2 years in Paris-Assas, which is like, one of the University of Paris kind of sort of colleges. And you ended up with a double degree in law with French law. And I think through that, I obviously went to different sort of law firm internships, and I realized that just law just wasn't really for me. And I then happened to go to a PwC. Actually, no, I think it was actually a Deloitte recruiting event, which was focused. And the way they sold it was, if you don't really want a career in law, you should come and do tax because there's the legislative elements, but also you're dealing with numbers and business. And for some reason, that sold me on it. I was like, I don't want to do law, but I want to use the skills that I developed. And I also want to be a bit more business focused. So like, maybe numbers and accounting and, I kind of like maths and that kind of thing. So that's how I ended up applying to the grad schemes at all of the big four. And then PwC were the first company that made me an offer. So I ended up going there and joining the grad scheme there.
One of my kind of regret is that I didn't study law. Because I think law from law you can go anywhere. Apart from being a doctor or an engineer, an architect, you can do any other business profession without a problem, in my opinion. So, but, law and tax, these two things, I cannot compare them. But anyway, so you went to PwC and then what happened after that?
So actually, the grad scheme there was 3 years. You get your accounting qualifications and then you graduate into a department. So I was doing deals tax actually. So all of the tax on transactions for private equity and real estate funds, which was actually, to be honest, I found it quite interesting because it's both intellectually challenging. Now, there's actually quite a lot of tax, they call it tax avoidance, which is legal, not tax evasion.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of sort of understanding the rules across different territories and trying to like optimize your tax, which I think I found quite intellectually challenging and stimulating. And it was combined with these sort of transactions, which were always very exciting. M&A always has like a deadline on it, like lots of different moving parts, and you get to be part of that environment. So I did that for 13 years. And as I say that actually for quite a long time, that was very much my career. And I progressed through the ranks to director. So by the time I left, I was a director in the real estate tax team. So director is the role level just below partner. And I was the only woman in that partner director population at the time. So that was a whole different dynamic. That actually, I guess, partly contributed to me leaving eventually as well.
Oh, let's talk about that. So what was that turning point? What was the moment when you said, okay, I can't do this anymore. I have to find a different way for me?
So what happened was I got promoted to director And the idea at PwC and, with any sort of organization is you want to spend as little time in the director position as possible so that you get promoted to partner as soon as possible. So typically, if you're doing it fast, it'll take 2 to 3 years. But in those 2 to 3 years, you have to prove a lot of things. You have to prove that you can bring in business, that you can deliver, that you can manage a team, all that kind of stuff. And I think being the sort of insecure overachiever that I am, what happened was I took on a lot. Like I was like, yeah, give me all of the big deals. I'm going to manage all of the teams. I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to do, all of this other stuff on the side. And I really wanted to prove myself in that environment. And the one thing with these companies, I think, and any company maybe, is that actually there aren't many checks and balances, because if you want to work hard, they're not going to stop you. No one's going to say, oh, hey, by the way, you're doing too much. Like, yeah, go for it, So I ended up taking on a lot, and it got to the point where I was receiving maybe 500 emails a day, and I wasn't able to keep up.
Emails. It was 500 emails a day.
It was bonkers. And the thing is, they sort of pile up in your inbox, and some people are very good at delegating, ignoring things, etc. And I think they manage, I don't think it's atypical actually for partners PwC to receive that many emails. But one thing that I was finding was, I was struggling obviously to keep up, because I had meetings actually all day really. And I felt very much like I was completely overwhelmed. But also I felt like a lot of the motivation behind what I was doing had sort of slid away. And so it got to a point where I remember actually I was in a pre-work meeting with one of the partners at PwC, and we're kind of prepping for the day. I had a panic attack. God. I just completely crumbled. Like I was thinking about all the things I had to do, and then I just started kind of crying uncontrollably. And then I felt like I lost control of like one of my arms. It was very surreal. And it really threw me massively. I think up until then, I had always believed that if I put my mind to something, I would be able to do it. And I think the fact that my body had then told me, hey, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Really shook me, actually, because it really fundamentally sort of went against my belief for my whole life that anything you put your mind to, you can do it. And so that actually then started a whole sequence of events where I was signed off, and then I tried to do secondment into a different team. But all of this was kind of alongside a lot of sort of personal reflection. And I think where I ended up was I realized that what I had been doing day to day at PwC for me just didn't align with my values any longer. And there was a big disconnect there. And as a result of that, it was manifesting in a physical way. Yeah, so that's what happened.
That's it. So what was the disconnect? What did you want? What were your values? And what was that didn't match?
I think I reached a point where I'm what you call an elderly millennial.
Millennial.
As an elderly millennial, I think I always felt that I wanted to find my purpose in life. And, for my life to have meaning. And one of the things I started realizing was obviously, in my day-to-day, I did find, the job challenging, etc. But it didn't feel like it was aligned anymore to what I really wanted to do with my life, which I didn't know actually what that was, but I also knew it wasn't that.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what sort of prompted it.
I see. And how did you feel emotionally? Were you able to sleep? I mean, what was it? Did you have your mind only on that problem? I just tried to understand how you felt during this period of time, because it's not easy. It's actually a very difficult period when you know that this is not what you have to do, but you have no idea what is that you want to do. It's like a vacuum.
Yeah, 100%. So what happened was I had that panic attack, and then I had another one actually quite soon after. at work again. So what I decided to do was to take a 3-month sabbatical. And during that time, I didn't want to put pressure on myself to find something new, but I wanted to kind of take that time to reflect and understand what had happened, but also, you know, what my values were now and what I wanted to do with those in the future. I remember during that time, so in those 3 months, I took a mindfulness course actually, because my thoughts and the anxiety around them were so all-consuming. And I think I'm an anxious person anyway. So whatever my anxiety focuses on, I'm going to just mull it over and it will constantly be in my head and it will get bigger and bigger. And at that time, the question really was, I remember writing it down in the mindfulness course, like actually they said, so what is the thought that goes on in your mind all the time? And I said, it's actually like, what is my purpose and why am I here? And so it was very all-consuming. And also, the other thing that you feel is you feel really lost, actually.
Yeah.
Because even though you know there's one thing that you don't want to do, you don't know what the next step is. And even though it should feel like an amazing time because you can go out and explore all the possibilities, it also feels extremely overwhelming because you can explore all the possibilities.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to narrow it down. So I did a course as well. There's a organization in London called Escape the City that actually run a course around finding your next step. And one of the things that really stuck with me on that course was the idea of like chasing your tennis balls. So they said, you know, if you have a dog and you throw a tennis ball, the dog will automatically, instinctively run after that tennis ball. And so what are your tennis balls? You know, what are the things that you love that immediately sort of draw you to them?
That's an interesting approach. Very interesting approach.
Yeah. I mean, I had stuff like coffee, which was probably not that. I was like, am I going to become a barista? I don't know. But there's actually, it was just nice to sort of have a little bit of that direction. And every day I would write down in the journal, like, you know, sort of how I was feeling, what are the things that gave me energy today, what are the things that drained me. And actually that's how I ended up finding Matchable, because during my time at PwC, I had a blog where I used to sort of interview inspiring people about leadership. And I realized the people I found the most inspiring were founders and people who have quit everything to start something that they, you know, wanted to build. And so I realized through that I sort of wanted to try and become a founder. Yeah. And then that's how I found Matchable, because I started Googling founder roles. So, you know, here in the UK, well, you probably know, you can apply to become a founder. You know, there's lots of places like Entrepreneur First or, you know, like incubators where they're recruiting founders to build ideas they've already tested. And so when I saw the ads to become a founder at Matchable, that's sort of how that happened. And I found my purpose.
That was quite a journey. So after you spent these 3 months and that was it, right?
Yes, but it was actually a longer transition overall than that, just because when I was at PwC, I did try to move into consulting. I tried that for 6 months and I learned a lot, actually. And then I returned to the team and then I realized I couldn't stay there any longer. So I then took the sabbatical.
Okay. And so what is the journey after that? You left the corporate life, you left PwC. Talk to me about that moment when you left, and how did you deal with finances? How did you know what to do next? Because it's just the process from idea to be the Matchable founder to action and create Matchable. Can you talk about this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when I left PwC, in those 3 months of sabbatical, one of the things I did was I always saved while I was at PwC. And to be fair, like, it's a great job that allows you to be able to save. So it's, you know, I had a little bit of kind of savings that supported me. And so that allowed me to kind of, do the 3-month sabbatical, unpaid. And then during that time, I actually also flew back to see my parents. And I know I was talking about it before, but yeah, the first thing my mom said to me was, are you lost? What's happened? And then my stepdad said, I don't think you should quit because, regardless of your mental health, once you're a partner at PwC, you can do anything. And clearly I didn't take either of them.
Okay.
So that was a whole other thing, in terms of crisis of identity and parents feeling disappointed with you as well, which, for me as an age, I think anyone, to be honest, if your parents are disappointed with you, it just feels really awful because you feel like you've let everyone down and you're just not living up to their expectations and maybe, your own. And it's a moment where you really just feel very, very lost because you're trying to let go maybe of values you had before, ideas of success you had before, and your identity from before. And you're trying to rebuild that in your own way, on your own, actually, often, because, you've spent so much time following other people's ideas of success. So then, luckily, financially, I was fine. And then when I found this role at Matchable, what happened was Matchable itself was actually an idea that came out of an incubator that was created by 8 of the UK's largest charities. So that included the British Red Cross, the British Heart Foundation, WaterAid, etc. And actually what they were trying to do was come up with business ideas that they could invest in that would allow them to prove that they can make money, not just through fundraising, but through creating innovative impact startups. And so they actually had this idea that they wanted to create a more efficient way to do skills-based volunteering. So instead of just traditional volunteering, like, painting fences, planting trees, etc., they wanted to enable people in companies to use their skills to do good. So for me, this idea really spoke to me massively because having been an employee at a company who wanted purpose, I really felt that if I had had the opportunity to do a volunteering project like the ones we offer at Matchable, that would have really made a big difference to me in terms of speaking to my purpose, and maybe I would have stayed longer. So it resonated a lot. So once I got the role, which was really nice after quite a few rounds of interviewing, the charities actually the incubator itself had a 6-month program that you could join with, different people and advisors who would support you in terms of giving you structure on what the next steps are. So things like a business plan and fundraising and, how to set up the company, etc. So I think I was very fortunate in getting that support early on.
Wow, great. I didn't know that something like this exists. What did you say the name of that is so people can take note of it?
So the incubator was actually called the Good Lab. It's not running anymore, actually. It was a 3 to 4 year initiative. It was amazing, actually. A few other startups have come out of that program as well.
Okay. And so now how many years are now since you started Matchable?
5 years.
5 years. What has changed?
Oh my God. So much.
Personally and business-wise.
Personally, I would say I've probably changed quite a lot. I think I've grown into myself, actually, and into my own values. And the reason that's happened is because, firstly, with startups, as you probably know, I think every day is school day. So you are constantly learning. Everything is new, and you actually get to create, which is amazing, the company you want. You get to recruit the people you want. You get to build the culture you want. And I think through those processes, you have to define for yourself, what are the values that I want my company to embody? What's the culture I want to build? What is the sort of team dynamic that I want? And so I think through that exercise, and it is constantly evolving, you grow a lot as a person, definitely. So I think I've had to really kind of know who I am in order to bring that to the business. And obviously as a leader as well, and as the founder, I think a lot of people look up to you, whether you want that or not, to lead people in a certain way. So I think that is also something I try to be conscious of, because you are also role modeling at the same time. Mm-hmm. From a business perspective, so much has changed as well. I mean, 5 years maybe sounds long and short. It feels like a lot has happened in those 5 years. I mean, the first year was more or less just me. And then the second year, we hired 3 people, but then COVID happened. So we started in 2019. So our second year was COVID year, 2020. And we did a lot of pivoting around from B2B to B2C in that year. And then we came back to B2B. And then on our third year, we kind of, raised a bit more money. We had a proper team. We felt like we had a business model. We had a platform. We had CTO. We had the tech. So that was 2021. And then in 2022, we felt like, things were progressing. But then, of course, last year was difficult because of the recession. And I think for volunteering as well, it's what we sell is often seen as an employee benefit. And in tough times, we are maybe one of the first things to get cut. So it was actually quite a tough year last year. So we had a lot of restructuring of the team. And yeah, that brings us to 2024, which is, now we are actually, doing the best we ever have. We've delivered over the years £5 million worth of impact to nonprofits and impact startups. Yeah, it's really cool to look back.
Amazing.
So yeah, and we're profitable. So that's one of the things we always wanted. So it's nice to finally be there.
Great. What was the hardest moment in the entrepreneurial journey so far?
Oh, there've been so many hard moments, Annie. I think the one that stays with me the most is, so last year, we actually had to let go of our whole sales team. And there were 5 people in that team. And I think having been an employee, actually, in a big company, I don't think I've ever really developed those skills to be able to let go of people. It's really difficult. It's very emotional. And it can go anywhere, really, because, people's emotions are involved. And especially with the team that you've recruited, who are people who believed in you and your idea, it feels absolutely gutting. Like, even though it is a business decision, ultimately, and I think everyone knows that, it still hurts personally. And I think that was definitely one of the hardest things I've been through, to know how to do it right. I mean, I'm still not sure I even did it properly. But, there's a lot of thought that went into it. We tried to do it in the best way possible. But I mean, even in the run up to that, I've been thinking about it for a few, I guess overall, like quite a few months. But, obviously it culminates and, when you have to let people go. And then the days before that, I just felt so anxious, so stressed out up until that point. And the thing is, when you do it as well, it's not about you. So, even though you might feel like this is the worst thing happening for you and the hardest thing I've had to do as a founder, it's not actually about you in that moment, of course, because you're letting go of people who, whose livelihood depends on you, like, their ego is bruised, like everything. And there's a lot of emotion, that you need to be able to respond to. And so I think that's definitely one of the moments I think I'll never forget. in this Matchable journey.
Yeah, well, I can completely relate with that. I have let go of some people, definitely made a lot of plans for restructuring and this and that in the corporate life. So yeah, it's not one thing you want to do. I would rather have a growth plan and opening of a new office or new country or anything like this. But unfortunately, life is not only consisting of that. There is always the negative part. You said that you were burned out before in PwC. So how did you change being an entrepreneur? Because I know the pressures are even higher, right? Because in a corporate life, you have some kind of a safety net, right? You can go to somebody, you can just relax a little bit because you know you have a salary, etc. But when you are leading a company, you can't relax it. It all depends on you all the time, 24/7. So how did you manage this so you don't burn out like before?
I think one of the things I noticed was that even though there's a lot more pressure and a lot more people depending on you in startup life, I've never actually felt as burnt out as when I was at PwC. I've never had panic attacks since I was there. And I think the reason for that is, firstly, I think because what I do now day to day really aligns with my values. And I feel like there's a purpose behind it and it's more me. The second thing is probably because I feel more in control of my own destiny.
Yeah.
Rather than reporting to someone else. So this is very founder thing to say.
Yeah.
But it actually just suits me better to have that freedom. And I think I would give that sort of security of having the company structure around me up in order to be able to, sort of have that freedom and do my own thing and make decisions. I think that was one of the things that when you're in a big company, you need, to go through a lot of sign-off to affect change. You need to go through a lot of politics. And then the change is slow, it's like, that kind of big moving ship. But, in startup world, if you want to change something or try something or test something new, it's really easy to do that. And I think it's so empowering to be able to do that. And I think that was also something that contributed to the burnout before, that I didn't feel like I could change my environment. And so it felt outside of my control. Whereas, now at Matchable, anything I want to change or the team want to change, we can talk about it and it happens almost, immediately.
Yep.
So I think those are the main things probably for me.
Taking actions and being in control. I completely agree with you. When you just do things and you put your 110%, but things don't happen because some person somewhere, you have to chase them for signature or, I don't know, for approval or, oh my goodness, I know, it's so tiring. And some people are designed like this. They enjoy, they thrive in this environment. Some people are not. Or some people just simply get tired of that and then just want something different. Were there any personal sacrifices you did with Matchable?
Yeah, I've actually been reflecting quite a lot on this recently. So I'm 41 now, actually. I say that with surprise because I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah,
maybe I never expected to get here.
Yeah, I know.
But
I'm 54.
Wow,
and I wonder what happened. As if it was yesterday. What happened?
I think it's actually this, and I think now I'm in my 40s. I think I see what I guess my peers who were at PwC, what they're like now. What they have. They have a lot of financial stability. A lot of them are partners now, which is actually incredibly amazing. And, obviously that's kind of what they were hoping for. They have families, they have, the big houses, they go on great holidays. And I think one of the things I have realized is that I did give all of that up, the financial security, because there are definitely moments at Matchable where I haven't paid myself or I'm not paying myself, the same amount I would be getting in a job if I was employed.
Yeah.
So I think from a financial perspective, I definitely feel like I've given up, potentially quite a lot that I could have, earned in a different job. But I think the one thing that I've also been thinking about is, do I want those things? And, as a woman also in my 40s, I think there's a lot of thinking around family. And, I don't currently have children, but do I want children? And it is getting to that kind of crunch time of, do I want children? And I think one of the things with this journey is that I don't think personally for me, I would have been able to do both, like be a mother and start Matchable, or do all the things I did with Matchable, if I had a child or like decided to have a family earlier. So I do sometimes feel like I did give up on, potentially that experience, not forever, but, just doing that earlier. So there's quite a few potential sacrifices that have, gone into this entrepreneurial journey as well.
No, I can imagine. And I had similar situation because I had my kids when I was almost 40. And after trying for 5 years, right? So sometimes you want them, but it doesn't happen. So, but the thing is, it's something that will happen if you decide and if you put your mind on it. So it's not a potential sacrifice, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the conclusion I've reached is that I actually, day to day, I love my life. I really, really do. And I've ended up in a place that, I've built the life that I want to live. And maybe it doesn't look like, what someone else, has built, but that's okay because, maybe it doesn't look like what everyone else thinks, a 40-year-old's life should look like. That's also okay because I'm living out what makes me happy and what success looks like for me.
Great. And you answered that question, what success looks like for you, because we have these stereotypes and then they're still so strong, right? And they say, oh, you have to be this and you never leave a corporate job. And then by 25, you have to have 2 kids or you have to be married or you have to do certain steps. But life is, especially what you do now, you love it. Well, that's life. You don't need to be something for somebody else, right? Because 90% of the population does this, doesn't mean you should do it too, right? And what's your mother thinking now about your company, Matchable? Is she reconciled now with your new style of life? I hope she's listening to this or watching it.
She'll almost certainly listen and watch this. To be honest with you, my mum has also herself had a massive, I think, sort of, not epiphany, but like a life change. And I think she's also been reevaluating her own values. And, maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, actually, alongside the journey with Matchable, she has been amazing. She actually said to me, I realized, I brought you up with certain values that maybe just don't align with your actual values. And I'm really sorry that I imposed those on you, which for a mom is like, so my mom is it's so huge.
Oh my goodness. She's formidable woman, your mother.
She is amazing. She is like my rock, honestly. Like she has actually started volunteering and she does a lot with the Befrienders. She's based in Malaysia, which is like the equivalent of the Samaritans. And she's become amazing at, so just EQ and understanding people and also giving like just the best advice, which she used to give anyway, but she's like now doing that for so many more people. So it's great.
Amazing.
And she's always, very proud of me. And she often says, Matchable is what we built. So,
yeah.
we can all take credit.
Amazing. And that's another amazing transformation, right? From a tiger mom to somebody who actually is totally supportive of your interests, which are completely on the other side of hers, right? The initial idea of how life should be. Amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
One last question before we finish. And honestly, I enjoy this conversation so much. If we had more time, I would have stayed for 2 hours talking about all these things, about life, universe, work, etc. But just to finish with your top 3 advice to people who want to do the same. They want to leave the corporate world and start their own entity. It doesn't need to be, startup, but they just want to do something on their own. What are your top 3 advice for them?
I think the first thing I would say is before you start anything, just get to know yourself. And it's okay to take that time to really understand what really matters to you. Because I think so often we get told by other people, by society, etc., what success should look like. But the beauty is in that we are all different and we all have different values, and definitely listen to those. Listen to your gut always if something doesn't feel right. Get to know yourself before you start anything, because that will put you on a really great foundation before you launch something on your own or go out into the world and do something different. So that would be my first thing. My second bit of advice is also to be flexible in terms of how you achieve the thing you want to achieve, because I think with us, for example, at Matchable, all we know is that we want to deliver impact, and we want to, get nonprofits and impact startups the support they need. And there are so many different ways we could do that. And just because we built it in one way doesn't mean that we have to stick to that, so we are constantly sort of questioning how we get there. And I think that applies in life as well. So if you know where you want to get to, there are so many different ways. So if one way doesn't work, that's okay. You can try another way, as long as you know where you're going. Yeah, and the third bit, third piece of advice, I actually would say is probably look after yourself, because I think for me at the moment, things like burnout and, panic attacks and things like that are kind of they're always actually very front of mind. And I think just generally as a population, we are, the way that we live is more conducive to stress and anxiety. Yeah, absolutely. So look after yourself, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't have your health, nothing else matters.
Exactly.
So, I think those would be my 3.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast. I thank you so much for doing what you're doing, because not a lot of people do that. And it's an amazing, amazing cause and goal in life to have this. I completely admire what you do. I wish you all the best personally too. And I hope we stay in touch. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie. It was lovely to speak.